Hey there, Trailblazers. So, the brand new version of Blade has officially been drip marketed today, and I know that a lot of you guys watching are looking forward to pulling for him when he comes out. So in this video, we're going to go over pretty much everything that we currently know about Blade's new variant so far. This includes his element/path, his playstyle, and the potential characters that he will synergize with. But before we get into all of that, I do want to quickly mention the usual disclaimer that everything that we currently know so far about his kit outside of the drip marketing is still based on early information and unofficial sources. So nothing here is fully confirmed yet, and things can absolutely change before his actual release. With all of that out of the way, let's jump straight into the info without wasting any more of your time. Okay, so starting off with the very basics. The drip marketing today officially confirmed that this new version of Blade is going to be called MORTENAX Blade, and he is confirmed to be a fire element character that follows the path of nihility. And honestly, that combination alone is already really interesting. Because when you look at the nihility path in honkaistarrail, it's easily one of the most flexible paths in the entire game. Characters on this path can act as main damage dealers, sub-DPS units, debuffers, or even damage over time focused units. So unlike some paths that are locked into very specific roles, nihility characters usually have a lot more freedom in how their kits are designed. Now, adding the fire element into that mix also opens up some pretty interesting possibilities. Fire units are typically associated with consistent damage output, break potential, and in some cases, damage over time mechanics like burn. So depending on how they design MORTENAX Blade's abilities, he could end up leaning into sustained pressure, burst setups, or even hybrid utility. Now, in the case of MORTENAX Blade specifically, it looks like he's going to be filling a very unique role. Based on the current information, he appears to be designed as a hybrid-style unit who can function both as a damage dealer and as a support depending on which form he's currently using. And honestly, that already makes him sound extremely interesting. Because a character that can deal strong personal damage while also providing buffs to the rest of the team is usually the type of unit that ends up aging really well in the meta. In fact, one way you can think about him right now is as a sort of universal version of Evernight. Similar to Evernight, MORTENAX Blade is expected to deal meaningful damage while also providing buffs that help the rest of the team perform better. However, unlike Evernight, his buffs don't appear to be locked into a specific playstyle or team archetype. And that's actually a really big deal. Because right now, we really haven't had a true universal style support in quite a long time. Most of the recent support characters have been heavily specialized into certain teams or playstyles, which means their usefulness is often limited to specific compositions. So if MORTENAX Blade really does end up being a universal support type character, then there's a very good chance he becomes extremely valuable across multiple team setups. Now, another thing that I know a lot of you guys are probably wondering about is his release timing. Based on the current projected schedule, MORTENAX Blade is expected to release around early June if the version cycle stays consistent. So the good news here is that players still have a decent amount of time to start saving Stellar Jades if they're planning to pull for him. And considering how popular Blade already is as a character, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of players start saving immediately. Now, moving on from the basics, let's talk about his overall gameplay structure. So one of the biggest things that makes MORTENAX Blade stand out is the fact that he's rumored to have two different forms built directly into his kit. The first form appears to be more damage-focused, while the second form shifts more into a support-oriented role. And naturally, that raises the question of how exactly he switches between those forms. Well, based on the information we currently have, MORTENAX Blade is expected to be one of the few characters in the game that actually has multiple ultimate abilities. And both of his forms are tied directly to those ultimates. So when you first enter battle and activate his ultimate, MORTENAX Blade will enter his DPS form. During this state, his abilities become enhanced, And he even gets a completely different outfit that visually represents his powered-up state, which honestly sounds insanely cool from both a gameplay and visual standpoint. Then, as the fight continues and you generate enough energy again, using his ultimate a second time will switch him into his support form instead. And this is where he begins providing buffs to allies and supporting the rest of the team. Personally, I think this kind of dual form mechanic is one of the most interesting directions they could have taken with his design, because it allows him to feel dynamic instead of just repeating the same rotation every time. Now, when it comes to what his support form might actually provide, there are still a few possibilities. One potential direction is that he could apply multiple debuffs to enemies, such as defense reduction, vulnerability increases, or resistance penetration. And if that ends up being the case, then he could become one of the strongest debuff-focused supports in the game. Another possibility is that his support abilities introduce some kind of special mechanic that amplifies team damage in a unique way. Something similar to how characters like Silver Wolf or Cyrene bring specialized utility that changes how teams function. Either way, if they manage to balance both his damage and support capabilities properly, then MORTENAX Blade could easily become one of the most impactful characters released in this version cycle. Now, another interesting detail worth mentioning is the comparison to Welt's Nova Flare upgrades. After receiving his recent buffs, Welt has become significantly stronger and more relevant in modern team setups. And some early impressions suggest that MORTENAX Blade could function like a more premium version of that kind of upgraded support damage hybrid playstyle, which, if true, would make him extremely valuable in both casual and endgame content. Now, moving on to team synergies. Even though MORTENAX Blade is expected to function as a universal support type character, there are still going to be certain teams where he fits especially well. Based on current testing information, one of the teams being explored includes MORTENAX Blade alongside Aventurin SP, Ashvale, and Danhung Permansur Terai. And honestly, that lineup makes a lot of sense, because Aventurin SP is expected to bring strong follow-up mechanics and team utility, while Ashvale and Danhung Imbibitor Luni both provide strong offensive pressure. So combining those strengths together could create a very well-rounded team composition that maximizes MORTENAX Blade's overall value. And while this specific team might end up being one of his best setups, it's also important to remember that universal-style characters usually work well across a wide range of teams. So even if you don't have those exact characters, there's still a good chance MORTENAX Blade will remain useful in other compositions. And honestly, that kind of flexibility is exactly what makes certain characters feel future-proof over time. Now, overall, when you look at everything we currently know about MORTENAX Blade so far, it's pretty clear that they're trying to make him feel both powerful and versatile. Between the dual form mechanics, the multiple ultimate system, and the potential universal support role, he already sounds like one of the most unique characters we've seen in quite a while. And personally, I really like the direction they seem to be taking with his design. But now I want to hear from you guys. How do you feel about MORTENAX Blade so far, and are you planning to pull for him once he finally releases? That's pretty much everything that we currently know about MORTENAX Blade as of now. If you found this breakdown helpful, feel free to leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to stay up to date with all the latest Honkai Star Rail news and updates. That's it for now, so I'll see you guys in the next video.